Hi, my name is Cyndi Peterson, and I'm from San Diego, California. My first trip to Medjugorje was in the year 2000, and I tell people, some people are called to Medjugorje. I was driven. And the way my call came about was I was working in my life, had everything I ever wanted. I was a physician with a house overlooking the Pacific Ocean, wonderful marriage to a man that I deeply love and still do, with 3 beautiful children, and working as a dermatologist. And I always felt that there was something missing in my life, and I could not find what it was because I kept looking to the world to fulfill me. And one day I was walking through a Christian bookstore, walking through the book section, when I noticed that a book up above on the top shelf on the left corner started moving. And it actually just kind of jumped off the shelf and fell at my feet. And I've never had that happen before. It gave me complete goosebumps. And it was Wayne Weibel's book, Medjugorje, The Message. And I picked that book up, and I thought to myself, I wonder whatever happened to Medjugorje. And it reminded me of my mother, who had just passed away. So I really wanted to buy it because she had talked to me once about Medjugorje. And I was on my way out to buy that book when something inside of me made me stop. And it said, Cyndi, if you have no time to read that book, absolutely no time. You're busy, you have a career, you have a family, don't buy that book. And I was just about ready to put it back when something inside of me said, Cyndi, you can put that back and nothing bad will happen to your life, but nothing will change. Your life will not change. Or you can buy that book and your life will change. And I thought to myself, what could happen from a stupid book? And that was the understatement of the century, I tell people. Because I went home and I hid it, and I woke up at night because I didn't want my husband to see me reading it. And I was reading this book in a little room in my house when all of a sudden I felt this power go through my entire body. My entire body was shaking. My hands were shaking, and I could feel it like electricity going through my head to out my fingers and out through my toes. And I was infused, which I know now, I was infused with the Holy Spirit that gave me such deep faith and knowledge of God. I knew that God existed. I knew that he was real, and I knew that I wanted to go to Medjugorje. And at the same time, I was given a vision of myself into my mind's eye, of me sitting behind a microphone, all alone on a stage, talking to a sea of people, not about medicine, but about my faith. And I did not want that. And I threw that book across the room. And I tried to get out of that. But I did want to go to Medjugorje. So I secured a trip to Medjugorje finally. And it was about 6 months down the line. Along the way, before the trip, I kept hearing this voice inside of me saying, you need to tell Jesus that you love him. You need to tell Jesus that you love him. And I kept putting it off until it started waking me up at night. And then I knew I had to do it. But it was only one day when I was in a gym, about ready to work out, when I was just about ready to get on the elliptical machine, when I noticed my shoe was untied. And so I was down on one knee, tying my shoe, when this voice came within inside of me, said, you need to tell Jesus you love him. And so I was so broken down, I just said, I'm going to go for it. And I went deep inside of me, and I only wanted to say, Jesus, I love you. When out of this, my heart came this deep prayer, and it said, Jesus, I love you with my entire heart. I love you with everything that I have. I no longer want my will to be done. I only want your will to be done, and use me to bring other people to you. And immediately I was flooded with peace. And I was beating myself up saying, why did you take so long to say that prayer? But I loved it. In the meantime, I was taking my kids, 2 days later, I was taking my kids to the Wild Animal Park, which is outside of San Diego. And I had my kids in the minivan, and I'm driving in the back country, taking a turn, just to make sure there's no traffic coming. I look to my left and start turning to the right when I stopped cold. Because what I saw in the entire sky was the face of Jesus Christ out of hundreds of clouds, kind of like a Seurat painting, but it was in such detail. I could see every part of his face, shoulder length, beautiful hair, kind eyes, beautiful teeth, and he was smiling at me. And I think it lasted for probably, honestly, 30 seconds, but for me it felt like 10 minutes. But I kind of came out of it, and I found myself pulled over on the side of the road, and then it kind of broke up and faded away just like a cloud formation would. But I never told anybody about it. But to know that God existed, to have seen his face, was incredible. And then I found out I was pregnant with my fourth child, and I couldn't believe it because my husband and I were trying to have another child, but we just couldn't, and I thought it was over. But now I'm pregnant with this fourth child, and I was thrilled because I was going to go to Medjugorje, and I was going to have that child with me, and I knew it would be blessed by that trip, and we'd have that forever in our family. So fast forward, I finally get to Medjugorje. We travel 24 hours straight to get there, and it's deep at night by the time we get there. It's pitch black. Everybody's falling out of the bus, just going to their rooms. But I didn't want to go to sleep. I wanted to go to Medjugorje so bad, and here I was, and sleep was the last thing I could think about. So I'm sitting outside just trying to take it in when a man that was on our trip actually approached me, and he said, "Hi, my name is Jim. I'm on your trip. I've been here before. I'm going to go up to Apparition Hill where Mary first appeared. Didn't know if you'd want to come with me." And I thought, "Are you kidding me?" "Yes, I want to go." So I ran and I got my flashlight and I got my brother who was on the trip with me. And we went up Apparition Hill, and I really didn't know how to get there because it was just rocks. All I could see was this beam of light on rocks everywhere. And we get up to Apparition Hill, say some prayers, come back down to the Blue Cross. When we're all sitting on those stone benches there, it was my brother, myself, and this man. Complete silence, deep prayer, when all of a sudden I notice this man kind of falls on his knees, and he just kind of slumps on the ground. And I went into doctor mode, honestly. I thought he was having a heart attack. And I don't know where I am, and I don't know what to do for this man. When all of a sudden I hear him say this, he said, "My children, thank you so very much for coming. You have made my son so very happy. Take your hands and place them over your hearts." So I placed my hands over my heart. And then he said, "Take your hearts out of your chest and offer them up to my son, Jesus." And so all of us were doing, my brother and I were both doing this. And then he said, "You may place your hearts back in your chest. You have made my son so very happy. Enjoy nature. Enjoy your lives. There is fleeting of that as a flower." And they kind of got back up and sat down. And I looked at him and I said, "Jim, was that Mary?" And he kind of smiled uncomfortably and said, "Yeah." And I said, "How do you do that?" And he said, "Well, I have been through all this investigation. I've been evaluated. I've even been put through 2 kind of minor exorcisms, but the church seems to feel that I'm receiving Mary's messages. I have to have a spiritual advisor. I have to be watched and I have to be obedient, but yeah." And I thought to myself, I didn't need to know that. I knew it was Mary. And I kept thinking, I haven't been here even a few hours and I've experienced this mystical thing because I wanted to go to Medjugorje and experience God. I wanted to go someplace I could touch, feel, smell, become so close to him to know how real he was. I was just driven for that, and I already had it. And my child, I'm carrying this child, and she's been blessed by this, and I was thrilled. So I went on with my pilgrimage, and I saw people's rosaries turning gold. I saw the sun spin. I witnessed a physical healing. I saw all of this, but I went home and I told everybody, all my friends, my husband, the people I worked with, nothing. I said absolutely nothing about the trip. I just said it was different, I said, because it was all for me. It was my private faith. It was very selfish, but I wasn't ready to share my faith. So I go on and I have my first child, and it's a girl. And we hadn't found out what the sex of our child was going to be, and I was expecting another boy. And I remember thinking, I have all those other things. Now I feel complete. I have my faith. It's my faith. And I have a girl. I have everything I've ever wanted. There's nothing else I want. But we soon found out there was something wrong with my daughter, Kelly. She couldn't move. She couldn't move her arms. She couldn't move her legs. She couldn't hold up her head. And eventually we realized we had to start searching out and figuring out what was wrong with her. And so we started turning to the medical professional for help. But no one could tell us what was wrong with their daughter until I found a pediatric neurologist who did a blood test, called me into her office 2 weeks later, and my husband, and said, "We have the news on Kelly, and it's not good. Kelly has a disorder called spinal muscular atrophy. I'm sure you heard of it." And both my husband and I looked at each other and said, "No, we've never heard of spinal muscular atrophy." And she went on to tell us that it was a genetic recessive disorder that both my husband and I carried this recessive gene, but that only 1 in 80 people carry that gene. So for 2 people to get together, it's very rare. And then on top of that, only 1 in 4 pregnancies will result in this disorder. And I was thrilled to have a diagnosis because I had been searching and searching for several months and no one could help me. And I was like, fine, we have the diagnosis. Let's move on to the treatment. What's the treatment? And I will never forget her and her kind eyes looking at me saying, there is no treatment and it's 100% fatal. And I don't think I've ever experienced such pain in my life. To be told your child's going to die is pretty devastating. And all I could get out was how long. And she said the average lifespan is 9 months. Kelly was already 4.5 months old. I couldn't believe it. And I kept saying, there has to be something. And she kept saying, nothing, there's nothing. And I said, how, what's going to happen? And she said, well, basically it's a little bit like Lou Gehrig's disease. You kind of lose whatever motor control you have. You lose the ability to cough. And so what happens is these children get a pulmonary cold, basically. They can't clear their secretions. They get septic and they die. And I remember thinking, a stupid cold is going to kill my daughter. And I finally understood there was really nothing we could do. We just had to go on with our lives. And so we went home that day, and I put my child to bed, and I called my husband in, and I talked to him, and I said, Drew, we need to talk. Because I had seen a physical healing in Medjugorje. I knew science, my foundation, everything I based my whole life on had crumbled beneath me. But I knew God could heal. I knew God could heal my daughter. And so we had healing services, we had prayer services. We ended up taking her to Medjugorje. Viska prayed over her, Father Yozo prayed over her. Many, many people who were in town, very powerful prayer people, prayed over her. But nothing happened. And on the way home, she got really sick. And I was surprised how fast she went down. We actually had the flight attendants hold the airplane, all the people, and we got off first and went straight to the hospital where she was admitted to the ICU. She pulled through that hospitalization, but something happened to me there. I was in her room when a medical student came in once and asked me to tell him about Medjugorje, because he had heard that we had traveled someplace with our daughter and that she had gotten sick. And he wanted to know about Medjugorje. And so I was telling him about it when I heard this voice inside of my head say, give him your rosary. And I kept telling him about Medjugorje, and I heard it again, give him your rosary. But I didn't want to give him my rosary because in Medjugorje, the only thing I really, really wanted to happen was for my rosary to turn gold, and it hadn't. But now I had one that was turning gold. It was only 3 links, but it was gold, and I couldn't give it away. And so I didn't. And I went home that day, and I felt terrible because I had denied God what he asked me to do for a man's soul. And it tore me up inside. But I eventually broke that rosary, and I went to get another one, exact same rosary that I'd gotten in Medjugorje. And I was praying with it that night, and I looked down at it in the middle of the rosary, and my heart stopped. Because in that time that I was praying, my complete rosary turned gold. And I remember saying to the Lord, I get it. You will always give me what I need. I just need to do what you tell me. And so I promised him I would never deny him after that. Fast forward, I get a phone call from my friend Jim, who I'd met in Medjugorje, who told me that Wayne Weibel was going to be up in his town in Washington and didn't know if I wanted to bring my daughter up. And I did. And so I brought her up, and we had Wayne pray over Kelly, because he can pray over people and they were healed at times. So I did that. And I tell people there's nothing that a mother won't do to save her child. And that's much like Mary is here in Medjugorje. There's nothing she won't do to save us. She's giving us the stones we need if we follow them, what we need to do to make it home safely. So anyway, Wayne prays over my daughter. Nothing happens. But that night, I find out that when Jim prays the rosary with the group, oftentimes he'll have messages for people in the group. He did have one for me. And one of it was to bring Kelly into the middle of the room and for everybody to gather around her and to lay our hands on her. And I couldn't believe it, because that's exactly what happened when we had a physical healing in Medjugorje here before any of this happened. We had all gathered around a girl who was really, really sick, laid hands on her, and she was healed. And so I couldn't believe it was going to finally happen. But the message I heard was this: do you see the love that you look at Kelly with? it's the same way I look at you. You see yourselves old and worn out, but I see you young and beautiful. There are many prayers for Kelly's healing, but you need to pray that God's will is done in her life. And I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I couldn't believe that God was not going to heal my child. I was so wrapped up in getting God to do my will, I had never considered that it wasn't God's will. And I've never struggled more in my life because I realized I was given my cross and there was nothing I could do to get out of it. I had to carry it through. So I go home. I go to the airport to fly home, and there was an event that happened on that plane. I couldn't get my boarding pass to get on that flight, but eventually I ended up getting it. And it took me a long, long time, but I eventually got on the flight. And I remember sitting down when I saw a man come up alongside of me, and he pointed to the seat next to me that was his. And I said, is this your seat? And he said, yes. And he was a nice young man, all in Navy camouflage. He was a Navy SEAL. I spent 10 years in the Navy. I was a flight surgeon, and I flew helicopters. I flew with the Huey helicopter community and the Cobra helicopters. And I've actually flown in an F-18, broke the sound barrier and things. But I see him, and I'd also taken care of a lot of Navy SEALs, and I loved what they do. So he sits down, and I start telling him how much I appreciate his service. When I hear in my voice something very, very, very quiet, I hear it in my head. And it says to me, I placed him right beside you. Are you going to deny me? And I said, no, I won't deny you. I told you I wouldn't deny you. What do you need me to do for you? And I heard, I need you to give him something. And finally I heard, I need you to give him your crucifix, which I had always worn around my neck at the time. So I took the crucifix off my necklace, but I put it in my pocket because I was like, how am I going to give this to the guy without him thinking I'm crazy? And I figured I would do it at the end of the flight. But God, the minute I had that thought, I got this incredible surge of anxiety. I knew that wasn't a good decision with God. I had to give it to him now. But I said a prayer. I said, God, you're going to have to help me because this is a little uncomfortable. And the minute I said that, I looked over and he, at the same time, looked at me and we locked eyes. And I said, you're going to think I'm crazy and that's okay, but I'm going to go for it. I just got a message for you now. Sometimes I get them, and I'm supposed to give you something, and I'd like to do it now if that's okay. And he kind of just held his hand out and said, okay. And I thought, wow, this is so easy. So I took the crucifix, I put it in his hand, I said, I'm supposed to give you that. And he looked at it, and he looked at me, and he said, well, that's kind of crazy. And my heart sunk. And I said to myself, see, God, this is why you have so few friends. This is terrible. I'm mortified right now. And and I heard myself say, and I'm supposed to tell you something. I remember just freaking out inside going, tell him something. I didn't know I was going to say that. And I'm yelling at God saying, you said give him something. I gave him something. I have nothing to tell this man. And I realized I just have to start moving my mouth. When all of a sudden I hear myself say, I'm supposed to tell you that he loves you very much, and he does hear you. And that man's face just fell. Tears streamed down his eyes. And he took the rest of that flight, and he just prayed with that crucifix, holding it to his heart, repeatedly telling me, thank you for telling me that. And I kept saying, I didn't tell you that. That's not from me. He goes, no, I know it's not from you, but thank you for telling me that. And it came to me that God was not going to heal my child, but he was going to use me to comfort other people. And I think he's calling every single one of us to comfort other people. And I think the more we use these messages of Mary, and the more we answer them and truly live them, because I was truly living every single one of those messages, that God can truly use us as a channel to walk and comfort people that he needs to let them know they are very deeply loved, that their prayers truly are heard, and that he just wants us all to get back to heaven. And that's it. We make it too complicated. And so there's several other things that have happened in my life. I went on to have, my child Kelly actually went up to go on and pass away. But at the time she passed away, I was 4 months pregnant with another child, Sarah. That child actually went on to pass away as well. And you can see pictures of them. They're beautiful children. I was asked to have Sarah because I didn't know if I should have any more children, but I wanted to stay true to the Catholic teaching. And you can read it in my book, that whole story. But Sarah transformed my life in that she was given a brief period of healing, but ultimately God called her home. And I was really angry with God because he did heal her for a short period of time. But then he ultimately took her home. And I didn't understand why he did that. Why was he toying with me? And it wasn't until I took it to adoration. And I basically sat down in front of adoration and just yelled at God. And I said, you have failed me. I've done everything for you. You gave me hope. You let me think that she was healed only to take her away. What kind of a God are you? Or some kind of cruel God? And I heard in my heart, have I failed you? How have I failed you? I have answered every true prayer of your heart. And I immediately knew what the truest prayers of my heart were. They came to me my very first trip to Medjugorje. I remember climbing Cross Mountain and praying from the depth of my heart, God, you have to knock my husband on the head so that with your help, he can have as deep a faith that I have, to know that you exist, so that we can live our lives as a true Catholic family, so that we can raise our children in a way that they will make their way to heaven. And so we began to, because of those children, my 2 daughters, I came out of myself, of my faith, and I talked to my husband. We prayed every night as a family over all of our children, but especially those 2 girls. Took my children to adoration, confession once a month, never missed Mass. They went on and played college basketball, so we had basketball all the time in our lives. We never missed a Mass anytime, any weekend. My kids have faith. My husband runs a Bible study now. I have people asking me, was it difficult for him to choose between married life and becoming a priest? And my husband never considered becoming a priest. So that's the profound effect a life lived with these messages can have. Our community was completely transformed by these 2 children. And now I go and I give my testimony around the world to people. And it's continuing to transform people and call them closer to God. So God is using me in a way I never foresaw, but I love it. Last story, 3 years after my last child died, my second daughter, I was called back to Medjugorje and I didn't know why. But at one point in my trip, I was called to climb Apparition Hill, and I didn't really want to. And I initially said no, but it kept coming to me. So I finally said, if I'm here, and I'm supposed to climb the hill, I will. Climbed Apparition Hill, and I was sitting down when I noticed my shoe was untied again. And so I was down on one knee tying my shoe, thinking, this is kind of funny. It's kind of like a bookend. It started this way. What's going on here? Tie my shoe, and I look up, and I see Mary, our mother, standing right in front of me, holding both of my girls, one on each side of her, in her arms. And I said, Mary, oh my gosh, to know that you are taking care of my children, that they're in heaven, is everything to me. I have no reason to be upset because a true mother only wants her children to go to heaven. That's it. That's what a true mother wants at her heart. And that's what Mary wants for all of us. And that's what she's doing here in Medjugorje. She's telling us how to make it home safely. And she's telling us if we do it, we will bring other people with us. But I remember looking at her, and in my humanity, I said, why? Why, Mary? Why did my children have to die? I did everything right. And the minute I asked why, my children were gone, and she was carrying the dead body of her son in her arms. And she looked at me and she said, why did your children have to die? Why did my son have to die? It was a sacrifice that you and I were asked to give. And then she was gone. And I remember thinking, if we only understood the depth of what our crosses can do for people, the graces that they unleash. Jesus' death opened the gates of heaven for us, forgave our sins, made reunion with God possible again. If my children had any little drop of effect like that, I would do it all again in a second. I would not change the outcome. My children made it home, and somehow graces were released for others. And I will spend the rest of my life trying to do that. And I think and I try to encourage people, look at your cross as an opportunity. It's a gift. You're incredibly privileged. If you carry it and offer it to God, you will bring many, many souls home. And that's my story. Thank you very much.